I am excited to be here with you on Your Brand Amplified with Alundas Havens, fellow podcaster, owner of an agency, and multifaceted individual. Thank you so much for being here today with me.
Thank you, Annika. It's an honor to be able to be here and do the swap with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for those who don't know, Alundas had me on his podcast. So it's going to be really great for us to co-promote together. And that's one of the things that I love about podcasting is meeting so many amazing people. And as we get into that, I'd love for you to tell a little bit about your backstory to our audience today.
Absolutely. And thank you. I noticed as well, we're actually not too far from each other in person. So I was like, awesome, because it leaves, networking in the future.
Yes.
But for me, I'm originally from Fresno, California. My parents split when I was about 3-4 years old. And they're 19, 21 when they had me. So just real young, and a lot of things they were doing. And in my case, like seeing all this stuff, had a racist stepdad in the mix. So it was one of those where like I had the self-identity problems and I didn't really know who I was because I would get a design in my hair and it's like, you're a hoodlum and that was kind of me, so it was really being in that shell, but at the same time, learning who I need to be in all situations so I can get what I want. So in my case, it was always like, I didn't know how to market myself, but essentially I did because I'm going around people and I'm like, oh, what's up, man? And I'm like talking to them a certain way. And then I get what I want in life. So it was kind of, what do I want to do? In my case, went through the military, started reliving all that stuff that I just really packed away. And I'd say for me, that's where it really hit me. And then it was, a couple friends along the way passed away. My grandfather, who was the cleanup person, the last year of his life, me and him got close. So he left. And when he passed away, that was tough for me because it was like I was the chicken with their head cut off. I'm doing all these things, nothing's working. I got out the military because I injured my right knee. And it was just from there, gaining weight because it was that I no longer could work out the same. And I'm like trying and nothing was working. And it was one of those for me, week before my daughter's born, I started the Winner's Paradigm podcast that you're on. And that's just where we help people recalibrate their mindset so you can mirror that definition of your success or whatever you believe is your definition of success, I should say. So in this case, for me, it was really looking at everything and been like, I could either cry and be the woe is me, or I can actually make action, get in the rooms of the right people and just learn how to better myself so I can get there.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you. That's all tough to do. And I know, a lot of times people go in the military because they're trying to find their what's next or pay for school or different things. My brother was in the Air Force.
That's awesome.
My grandfather was a colonel in the Air Force. My dad and his uncles on my Caucasian American side were all in the military because they were of that age, right? Where you didn't have a choice. You didn't do it because you had to enlist.
Absolutely.
And you had to do something. And I think it instills really strong work ethics and values. But I want to know, on top of like everything that you experienced in life, and then you went in the military, when you came out of the military, did you find that structure and what you learned in the military, those skills, helped set you up for your next phase of life? Were there very many resources available for you as a veteran? Because I know that's also been an issue when we're looking at employment or skill sets, or like, how do people find jobs? And if you have not had a traditional career path, because the military is not a traditional career path, but
Absolutely.
I feel like there's still a lot you can gain from it that shows people that you are going to be amazing at what you do.
Absolutely. And thank you, for going in that. I'm like going in a tangent in my head. I'm like, oh, I know what I'm going to talk about. But yeah, so originally for me, getting into the military, first adapting into it was a little easier. The only thing is I'm uncoordinated. So it was one of those, like when I'm going through training and I'm just like, yeah, I can't do this. And it was like, that's it, so kind of like that job, I like talking about that jump first, because for me, that was some more the internal stuff. My dad was real abusive, narcissistic. So it's like, it was one of those, they're yelling at me. I'm like, oh, this is easy, so I was able to use that as an upper hand. And I just say that for people. So if they're in that position or, they felt that way, like in my case, like I used that to the upper hand, got through it. Now, what got difficult, I'd say, is like beginning of year 3, I started college. And that was different in the service. The reason why is you have the people who are serious about their craft and they're masters at it. They know their job like the back of their hand. They study. And then there's the people who've been there long enough. So for me, it was like going to school initially. And it was like, all right, well, now I learned that I actually put the work in. You can definitely tell the person and who that leader is and, what they're doing. And then it was, getting out the military. And yeah, there is resources available. You go through training before you get out, but it's one of those, once you do it type things. So luckily for me, I wanted to get into brewery sales. And I use that as an example because they were like, yeah, we can set you up. So I talked to like 4 different business owners in San Diego, and that's what I wanted to do. I was like, I want to start a brewery. And no, don't do it. That was when COVID hit. So no,
Oh,
don't do
wow.
it, and they're like telling me not to. So eventually after the 5th one of having a conversation like that, I was like, all right, this isn't for me. But there are those resources. A lot of it is they either give you it or make this phone call type deal, and that can set you up. So it does get difficult. Where it hit me hard was, so when I was 19, 20 years old in the Marine Corps, I was my own boss. And then I worked at a mortgage brokerage with other 22-year-olds, which was extremely tough because it was a frat house on Fridays.
Oh, man.
And they were just young. And to set it up, like I was my own boss, I'm doing that. I'm married, have a home. I have all these priorities. I go to the gym 4 o'clock in the morning, and these guys are like talking about getting off their mom and dad's couch or going out. And I'm like, no,
Oh
I
my
don't do
gosh.
that. I'm reading
Yeah.
books. I'm focused on what I'm trying to do. And that's where, I started having those problems again, where I was arguing with people because it was just like, to me, I've already went through that phase of life earlier
Yeah.
on because I was my own boss and that was the time of its own. And then it was like translating back to real world. And it was just like, I had to really start working on those beliefs, started working on affirmations type deals. Because in my case, I was projected it and they're not understanding, but it was like, all right, well, that's not the audience. That's my ideal audience. So it makes sense that I'm running into some of these things.
Yeah. And also making sure you're surrounding yourself. And that's something you recognized, making sure you're
Absolutely.
surrounding yourself with people who are going to uplift you and up level you to where you see your path going, not stay static. And that's a lot of what you do on your podcast is
Absolutely.
talk about this and talk about mindset and talk about how to shift that paradigm to get where we know we want to go and not be surrounded by that other influence.
100%, Annika. And that's what I loved even talking to you about when we're talking about PR and
Yeah.
kind of using that for the benefits, and doing what's going to bring us the best reward, but being ourselves genuinely. That was something like with the podcast. It's like, yeah, I will talk about some of those things sometimes. And it's like, I don't want to, but it's me showing the vulnerability side. And then 2, explaining like, this is why, and this is how I overcame it. Or in your case, if you're in this situation. So that's why I really do, I dive into that or talk about, when I injured my knee, and it's like dealing with that ego problem. Because again, I was up here, now I'm down here. And it was like the same as getting out and then figuring out, all right, college isn't for me anymore. I'm doing it, but it's just not telling me how to make money for my business and grow my leads.
Right. Yeah. I think that is a common now disclaimer because I am
Absolutely.
now a professor teaching grad students in PR.
I know,
But
you're amazing.
thank you. But everything that I learned was completely organic, an organic path, and just like learning from this job and then meeting somebody, oh, you want to do that? Let me introduce you to this person, and figuring it out along the way. So I think often, yeah, university, college can give us the information, the book smarts, but it doesn't actually teach you what's going to happen in the real world necessarily. And I think that's something that we can change though. I mean, that's, for my class, I'm going to be bringing in real case scenarios of clients that I work with in different situations that we can really think about how to solve things in the real world when it comes to branding and PR. So yeah. And so that takes us to, you had this journey, you did, you were in the military, university, mortgage broker. What was the impetus then for starting a podcast and a media company?
Okay, so the podcast was first, and that was, like I said, everything built up, and I was just like, I need to channel my outlet, but I need to be me. So week before the daughter was born, I said I was going to start the Winter's Paradigm podcast, and I was really going to start tapping into that. Kind of to my business partner now, Zach Babcock. He's into that self-development. He even started a mastermind now, and it's amazing working with him, but to like having those personal felt talks and I'm talking about these things and I'm like, man, and it's diving into that, excuse me. So first it was that section. Starting the media company was funny. I actually was working at a job helping veterans out. It was selling memberships to veterans to get their disability ratings improved. So it was a great job, but it was tough because Vietnam era, they weren't treated great when they got out because of the media back then. So it was just like dealing with that moral dilemma. And it was like, hearing them vent every day. Yeah, I can keep doing it. And then we actually had a nanny that moved to Minnesota. So I'm watching the baby, I'm making sales calls. They're mad at me because in between calls, I'm not making, in between the scheduled calls, excuse
Right.
me, because that was one thing they tried to flip. In between scheduled calls, I was supposed to be making cold calls, and I didn't because I was taking care of the little one. So I talked to the boss. I was like, here's my corrective action plan. I'm working 60 to 80 hours.
Wow.
And it was, hey, I'm making this happen regardless. The wife was okay at it because we needed the money at the time. But it was just like, all right, capped out on salary. So I was just like, what are we doing? He's like, oh, is your heart still in it? And I was just like, all right, that's a corporate move. So from there, went back to my mastermind group. And that was where I was just talking. And they were like, you're a leader. And they started telling me about these things. So from there, it really jumped into starting Alpha Influence Media, where we help other alpha entrepreneurs, alpha podcasters get online to their ideal audiences to deliver massive impact. And really, when I'm talking about impact, is just from a core value standpoint. It's like, hey, what is your brand about? What are you specifically doing? Yes, we can get you in touch with these people. And that's part of it too, is having that network. Because Zach's been around and talked to all these people and has these networks. So it's like, we're able to get people connected, but more importantly, figure out like, hey, what aligns more to your purpose and what are you guys trying to accomplish versus just promoting something we don't believe in. So that's really, we focus on that mission-centric approach, and it's created a lot of good relationships for me. And it's been something that was kind of crazy initially because it's actually focusing in having those like-minded people around who bring that positivity.
Yeah, no, and that's truly amazing. We've talked about this before. There are a lot of companies out there, a lot of media companies, a lot of PR companies, a lot of marketing, a lot of branding. Not everybody comes at it the same way that you and I do, which is from that heart-centered approach of we really only can work with people that we feel super invested and authentic about. So when somebody comes to you, I think that's one of your big market differentiators, right, as a company. But when somebody comes to work with you, what's that process look like? And then I'll ask my second question after you answer that so that we don't get confused, because otherwise I'm going to like throw a whole bunch more out there.
Absolutely. So I'll walk you through it real quick. So first thing is I would say is, Annika, tell me specifically, who your ideal avatar is. And then we'll jump into there. Once they start opening up on it, it's either that they know their avatar right there or they're thinking of something else. So I'll give a perfect example. I had one guy and he had some notable people on his podcast already. It's just like, he's not a fit for us, but I wanted to be able to gauge him and see where he's at. So I'm asking these questions. He's giving me a lot of rebuttals, these feedback. And I'm like, all I'm asking him is, who's your ideal client? Who's your ideal audience? Are we in entrepreneurship? Are we opening up about your story? Are we going more about the brand awareness? What direction do we want? What is more aligned to your guys' mission? It comes out that he's like, oh, if you give me a Russell Brunson, I'll work with you. Like, no, that's not what we're going to do. And we're not going to guarantee you something like that. So it was one of those, where I was like, hey, he's not a fit for us, even though he may have been a good client for somebody else. For me, it wasn't a good fit because it was going down that. So that's really where I like asking those questions. Because again, you can get them on podcasts and it's one of those, but then any podcast is any podcast, and it takes work, but I would rather have them be like, all right, I want to go self-improvement. Maybe, you can speak on your journey getting there or adversity you felt there and then how you started the business from there. Or let's go more mission-centered in this campaign so we can be able to focus in on whatever we're promoting back to us. So they come back to us, then buy our product. Okay, cool. So that way it's strategic and they know what they're doing versus just wasting the time, the energy. And again, if you can dial in on your business and do what you're good at, that's where it's been huge for me as well.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. I always start everything with when I onboard a new client, do you have a SWOT analysis? Do you know who your competitors are? Do you have your mission, vision, brand values? Do you have all of this? And we walk through an exercise that goes through some of that stuff just so that we can hear it in somebody's own words. Because if they don't have that, it's going to be really hard to sell them, right? Because that is kind of our job, is to, as promoters, is to get somebody else to say yes. Yes, I want you on my podcast. Yes, I want your good or service. Yes, I want to promote you in this magazine, whatever it is.
Absolutely. And I'd love to add on that, what you just said there. That was something for me when I'm starting the process as well. And of course, it's with your business, so it's with the process, but it was how things were worded based off the information. So I'd say for me, like, I already asked good enough questions of what I thought it was, but it was getting more specific with the guest or who the client was. And it was like, hey, what are you trying to do? Because we may have had the information and then it's like they just left off a little part because we didn't ask them about it or tag it back into their business. And it's like, oh, so you're, a business to business company. Well, actually, I'm more marketing side. Okay, well then now it allows us to have
Right.
more, what we can look for, because I made that mistake. So that's why I share it, because I'm like, it was something small, and then after like changed it for me. And I was like, oh, okay, cool.
That's really important. And I think that's something we're always growing and learning too. But just because somebody looks like they even might be your ideal client when you start working with them does not mean that they end up being your ideal client.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. And so when somebody comes to you, what are some of the expectations? Because I know from being a podcast host, sometimes I'll have a guest come on and they're like, oh yeah, I did 10, 20 podcasts. Like that is their life. They're all about the podcast life and just getting on as many as they can. But most people do not have that much time, because they're trying to run their business and then also promote their business through podcasting and other formats. But, I think that's an expectation that people don't always realize is like, how available are you? How much, time can you put into this? Because it is a time commitment.
Absolutely. And that's why what I do is like, I'll get them on a set number of shows per month and I'll say, hey, we're charging X amount to get you on this, right? In this case, that's why I try to specifically focus on podcasts like yours that are well established, top 5% of the world, they have 10,000 downloads, or, that they're able to continually every single week drop an episode. So everywhere that they're going, in their case, they're like, man, I have to commit to this because these people are locked in on what they're doing. And then at the same time, like, hey, it's a commitment you're doing because it's the long game you're doing with podcasting. Yes, you can pay into it, you can do it, but if you pay for your downloads or whatever you're looking for, it's not going to reflect because it's not organic. That engagement, you're going to have 10,000 followers, but it's not going to be the engagement that you're looking for because you're not specifically, growing them, going on other shows. So that's where I do it there. And then I'm like, hey, we made the commitment to the person, make the commitment to yourself. You said 4 shows, you said 5 shows. Let's get you on these shows. If it doesn't work out, just let me know or let them know, hey, let's reschedule it. But I'd say like, that's what you have to do. So it could just be simple as, hey, 1 a week. And that's the only thing I'm committing for you. So in their case, they make it. And then that way your service and what you're doing, they're like, okay, we're strategic, we're set in here, these are the boundaries, this is what I need to do so I can be able to get here. And again, we're working 6 months at a time. So it's something where it's like, you're continually doing it, it's going to lead to that habit. Then they may not even need you anymore because you've taught them exactly what to do, which is even better because now they're going to go tell a friend and then you got another client there.
Nice. I love that. I also think a couple of things that you just mentioned. One is, it doesn't, like, I know you and I are both booked out for a long time on our podcasts.
Absolutely.
If somebody comes on now, they're probably, August, this isn't too bad, but their episode's probably going to drop November, December. Right. So like for me at this point, I know you're even further out than I am. Like you're already talking about next 2023. But when we do this work, whether it's podcasts or other forms of PR and marketing, the results are not instantaneous. It takes time to build that up and to build up your credibility, your visibility. And, if somebody's serious about podcasting, generally they are going to be full and they're not going to be able to even have you come on an interview for 2 or 3 months down the road necessarily. And then your episode will drop. So you have to be thinking as well as a business owner, okay, what am I going to talk about? Like, where is my business going to be when this episode will be released so that I am mapping to that. If you have a new book coming out, a new course, a new offering, whatever that is. And so it takes some pre-planning. It's not just like, we can get you on a million podcasts right away, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the right fit and that you're going to be able to target your message appropriately unless you have this information.
100% agree with you. And that's where I'm at as well, to make that a focal point, is it's like, hey, it's going to be the long game because I'm doing it for myself as well. So like we talked about, like I did 36 podcasts in 6 days.
Yes,
and that was something where it was like, I pushed through it because I had the time. Luckily, the wife took the baby. So I'm like, all right, and that's all I did for that. But at the same time, it was like, it's not about just getting it done. It was more about, hey, dialing it in. So that's where I circled it back. And it was like we talked about the 3-month projection or when the book's going to come out. So it's just like, don't mention the service, just mention, hey, come back to my podcast. And then I just put it on my podcast, 15-second
nice
after the hook, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And just put in there, hey, if you're looking for this, that way you're just having the people go back to you and be strategic about it. Because I'd say that's where I messed up initially in podcasting, was not circling back to me,
Hmm.
not being clear about it, origin story taking 12 minutes. So it was really
Hmm.
dialing that in to go shorter, because I know sometimes we give too little, too much. So figuring out what works for you. And then I'd say, just really being comfortable with it, having a conversation like we are, makes it so much easier when you're first like working it out, figuring it out. And again, I messed up on all these things. So that's what I like to set on those expectations as well.
Yeah, you're taking everything that you learned, that you did right, and
Absolutely.
that were not wrong, but learning experiences for you to help your clients now.
Absolutely.
That's the best way to do it. That's all, because you've tested it out yourself. So you're not just going out and saying, oh, I'm going to sell these services, I'm going to get you on podcasts, but you have that authority of, I've done this myself. I know exactly how to make sure that we're being most effective with what we're doing for you. So I love it. Now I don't even know about I know there's a lot of ways to get organic growth on a podcast. I didn't even know about this whole thing of like, but I guess it makes sense. I don't know how you do it, but just like you could do for any social media, right? Where you can work with people who might not give you genuine followers, likes, whatever it is. So you can actually do the same thing with a podcast.
Yeah, so Buzzsprout has one. I'll just use that because I just see that it's like $500 a month or something like that.
Oh.
And they will give you, basically it's like they push ads through it. So there is Spotify ads. Spotify ads are pretty cool because you can click on, for instance, like it'd be your podcast, right? You'd have a little excerpt in somebody else's podcast, and then they'd be like, all right, click here now. You click on the button, it takes them directly to your podcast. So there's some ads like that, some of them that they push yours to the top of the searches, but you can pay for stuff like that. And that's where it's like, yeah, you can get the downloads, but it's one of those that's like, depending where you are and how you're going to use it, could be, so if you're like you're at the beginner stage or yours is slowly growing and then you do it and may not see anything because you may see them come on there, but it's not really real because once you stop paying into it, it's not. But if you're at the point where you're like, okay, I have all this, I'm just trying to boost my numbers up so I can get here, get in this class, then 100% go for it, because then it's leading you into it to bigger, guests, bigger podcasts for yourself, or you're doing it for the business in that end because you have the funds there.
Yeah. Okay. Now that's interesting. And that one, I mean, advertising makes more sense than like, I was thinking it's like some website you go and it just gives you fake like bot followers or something. So what are some of the ways that if somebody is looking at starting a podcast, that they can create organic growth and buzz around what they're doing?
So I'll just say first, of course, it's going to be core values, which me and you talked about. Just circle in on who are you? And I'd say for me, it was like, again, like I said, all the identity issues and all these things that I focused not on. So it was really like focusing on what are you trying to do and then making it happen for you. So it was, hey, being real about myself, core values, transparency, accountability. So I got to do that, say that. And it was one of those for me. So it allowed me, when you're making that content, to make it more heartfelt. Because if I go through a story, it's exactly speaking to, my younger self. Like we always say about customer avatars, it's just the younger version of ourselves.
Nice.
But it was one of those for me where it's like, hey, get crystal clear with that, and then everything will follow. Because even now, I kind of felt that over the weekend. I was like, I needed to make a post, and it was like, all right, I have writer's block, and I'm like, and it was just like, I'm not going to stress it. I'll let it come to me. It came to me. I put a post out, fixed it a little bit, felt better about it. So it was one of those where it's like, if you just align yourself, you have those positive thoughts, you really work on yourself, work on whatever you need for your brand, whether it's spirituality, reading, watching videos, talking to other people, like episodes like us. That's where it's going to allow you to be able to create that better organic content that's actually going to work, because it's going to be effective to people because they can feel it on a personal level. And then too, they're like, wow, if you did that, I can do that as well. Because you will get those people that tell you that.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. Well, what continues to inspire and motivate you? I know besides your little one and your wife.
So for me, I've just had a lot of people close to me that aren't here anymore. So I'd say what inspires me is them, because a lot of them were young. 5 friends, my grandfather. And it was one of those where it's like, if my people aren't here anymore, I can't say like I'm mad at life or like mad about having a bad day today. Like I had an anger problem, so it was like slowly working on that. It was like, all right, figuring out, hey, what is that? But in my case, like getting the inspiration was like, hey, they can't do it anymore. So I got to do it for me, but not only me,
Wow.
for them. So it was like taking that and flipping it, because for a while I was just really upset and I was just like, I hate life. And it was like, yeah, that's not it. So I put more inspiration to there, and then to kind of just looking at the journey, and it's like my older self, and even me in the room with the people, or meeting some people that I didn't. And it was funny, like one of my good friends now, I fangirled when I first interviewed him for the interview. And it wasn't like I wanted to, it was just like a natural response. And I was like, oh, this dude's actually a pretty cool dude. And
Nice.
we're like talking in person, and I'm like, yeah, this is a little weird for me, because it was like I never thought that would happen. Plus, it's like the whole friends online thing. Like it was
Mm.
just funny was when it was in person type deal. But I'd say for me, it was like really looking at that journey, and it's like you already came through from here, or watching other people, and you're like, if they can do what I can. So in my case, it's like really just surrounding yourself with that good energy.
Hmm. Yeah, and then you're serving as an inspiration to other people who hear what you've gone through and see your journey.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you, Annika. You've been a
Yeah.
great friend, just meeting you and even doing
Oh.
swaps to where it was awesome. Like getting to know you on a personal level, but to
Mhm.
like sharing that with people and being like, hey, yeah, this is just some of the relationships we have with people where we met them, we had the genuine conversation, and then it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I love it. It's my favorite part. So what is next for you in Alpha Influence Media?
That's a good one. So I'll give a little bit of hints.
Okay.
So the first, the first one, so after Influence Media, from there, we're going to blow it up, and kind of take our podcast to next levels. What I'm looking to do strategically is create some partnerships, to where I have a couple guests locked in now. So we're going to have like a kind of a tier list of guests. So there will be six-figure entrepreneurs and above, but you'll have new clients that come in, and they could either be from low ticket, or if they're just starting their podcast,
Mm.
and then you kind of get them up kind of with shows as well, have that built in to where it's like, yeah, they pay into a premium, but that's getting them booked on shows as well, because that is a factor with a lot of them.
Mhm.
So it's to build that up, and then from there be able to start growing their audience, helping them out, with getting the guest side taken care of, so they just show up, do the work.
Nice.
And then from there, I feel like Alpha Influence Media, we're eventually going to go brick and mortar. And then I'm probably next year, what I would like to do is get a studio going for that, and then kind of offer that up to clients as well. Hey, we're going to rent this out. You can come in here these days, and
Yeah.
that's where they're going to be able to be at that brick and mortar center, which, yeah, so that'll probably be in Carlsbad. And then the end of next year, we're going to be doing an event out in San Diego. So every other year will be San Diego and then LA. So
Okay.
that's going to be pretty interesting doing it, just because I went out to my partners in St. Louis, and right when I was out there, all my friends, oh, when are we going to do one in San Diego? When are we going to? And I'm like, you know what? So let's get strategic. So that's where I want to focus it towards then, maybe middle of next year, but it'll give us some time to be able to grow the audience, grow what we can do for our clients, and then to just bring that in person. So it's like we have it mapped out. In their case, they did in 45 days, and it was amazing. But I want to make sure that we actually lock in total everything, because I am not them.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. And that's something, with my iteration of my business now, I'm definitely like taking that slower approach to make sure I have everything set up properly, all my systems, my accounts, everything that I need to make sure that this is going to be successful and not have some of the same pitfalls as my last business, or like, other things that I've done in the past. Because I think that's one thing that you and I have in common as well, is like learning like from all of our past experiences. None of them have been failures, just experiences, just lessons for us to learn, some of them over and over again. But
100% agree.
yeah, but that gets us to who we are and where we are today. So you'll have to let me know when you're doing your all your in-person stuff, because I would love to come out and support and invite people.
I appreciate you. Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking too. When I was looking at it, we started talking, I was like, that's pretty awesome, because that's what I'm looking to do. In their case, what was cool about the event, 80% of the people were from St. Louis. So it was like, man, it was cool going over there, but I'm not from over there.
All
So
right.
it was like, you know what, I'd like to have that in LA or San Diego and have that
Yeah.
tight knit community. So slowly been adding on to that, couple people out in Las Vegas. But it was like, yeah, if I pull events together, now I can do it. So I'd say like,
Nice.
that's one key I'd give to people, is just focus on those relationships. Because In my case, it was like, oh, I didn't know there's that many people, or maybe I thought they were bigger than me. And it's like, now they're genuine people. You just got to be able to connect with them. In my case, it's like being around great people like you allows you to be able to do that, because then you're like, hey, bouncing ideas, or even, having in-person events.
Awesome. So Alundas, what is the easiest way for people to follow you on social, learn more about everything that you're doing, listen to your podcast?
Yes, so social media be the Winner's Paradigm, and then the podcast is the Winner's Paradigm, or thewinnersparadigm.com. That's where you can be able to go there, subscribe, and then just really find out on a personal level about me. If you want to hear about Affluent Influence Media, just go to thewinnersparadigm.com.
Awesome. That makes it super easy. One place for all the information. Love it.
Absolutely.
And I'll just drop a little note to our audience. If you're listening right now, please go to the Winner's Paradigm, give it a listen, give it a like, subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review, leave a comment. Same thing for Your Brand Amplified. Those really do help us out. And then I want to ask if you have a favorite quote or a mantra that you live by.
So I'm going to go really generic on this. And the reason why I say it is because I love this quote, but everybody loves this quote all of a sudden. But for one that I really lived by is the, I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Because I feel like that Bruce Lee quote is something like, yeah, everybody says that now. But I took that to heart. It's like when you look at warriors and they master their craft, and it's all around aspect of life, all the single aspects. In my case, it was like working hard on the business and then not focusing on relationships, or focusing on relationships and not the business. It was really looking at that, or, focusing on the business and everything in life, but you're not focusing on your health. So in my case, it's like doing that, mastering it, and then sticking to that routine. So having the non-negotiables, and you're like, hey, this is what needs to get done today, or this is what gets done every single day.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And is there anything else that you want to share with our audience before we sign off today?
That's it. You've been amazing, and I really appreciate you and doing the interview swap. And it was great, to be able to talk to you on a personal level, but really help people as well.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited for everybody to be able to hear this episode. And thank you to our audience for coming back for another week of Your Brand Amplified. I'm Annika Jackson. And by the way, my new website is yourbrandamplified.co, where you can find out all the information about the podcast and everything else that I'm doing in the world of marketing and PR. So I am so grateful to have a new friend and colleague in the world with Alundas. Thank you so much for being on the show today. And thank you to our audience. I'll be back again next week.